In alhamdulillah, wa salat, wa salam ala wa rasulullah. Welcome to our series on the lawful and the unlawful. And this is the class whereas we discuss those things that are lawful in Islam and those things that are not lawful in Islam. And we've been speaking in particular about business transactions. What are some lawful and unlawful business transactions? And by the way, do you guys see me on YouTube streaming, or is it still just showing that little circle thing? They're so far behind with us with the lag. I see myself on the other platforms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see you, Laila. You're on there.
Okay, so it'll catch up. Okay, great, because I couldn't tell. I'm so lagged up. Okay, but alhamdulillah, we've been speaking about the lawful and the unlawful business in regards to business transactions. Business transactions. So let's put the PowerPoint up on the screen. And by the way, there will be a quiz after this lecture. So this makes to make sure you all are paying attention. All right. Yesterday, we spoke about the lawful and the unlawful in regards to interest. And as we talked about, every Muslim here should know that interest is haram under all circumstances. Interest is haram under all circumstances. But let me first of all ask the question, what is interest? Because we found out yesterday that a lot of Muslims don't understand what interest is, what it entails. Who can tell me what is interest? What does interest entail? Can anybody explain? What is interest? What does interest entail?
It entails borrowing some money and then paying back more than what you borrow.
Okay, does everybody agree with her? She said it entails borrowing money and paying back more than what you borrowed. Does everybody agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, good job. Exactly. That's what interest is. Interest entails borrowing and paying back. If it doesn't have to do with you borrowing money and paying it back, forget about interest. That's what it is in plain simple terms. So if it ain't about you borrowing and paying back, don't ask. That's the simple way to understand things here. But what about this? Is there ever a situation that we might incur where we're forced to deal with interest? Are there situations in which a person may be forced to deal with interest? What do you guys say to that?
Yes. For example, you have to go to work every day and your car's broken down and you need a car. So you go get a car and you don't get the most extravagant, you get what you really can afford with as less interest as possible.
Good job. Exactly. And that's what we talked about. Interest will never be lawful. It's always haram. It's always bad. It's always dirty. But you may find yourself in a situation where you have no choice but to deal in interest. And should you find yourself in that situation, there has to be conditions. And the number one condition is it's a situation that has no alternative. There's no alternative way out. Okay? And then you have to hate the fact that you have to do this. And then, look for alternative ways to get out of it. So let's talk about that for a second. What about this? Is taking out a student loan for college? Does this fall in the category of a pressing need to indulge in interest?
No.
Why not?
Because you can get grants, free grants. You can get scholarships, and you're using your brain. So you're using what Allah's given you to get those things that are free for you. Okay. In other words, there's other alternatives. There's many other alternatives for you to get financial help for college other than taking out a loan. And the number one thing is go to a school that you can afford.
That's the problem. When we go to schools like Harvard University and Ivy League schools that we can't afford, then that's when you end up with a problem. Okay. And what about this? Buying a house. Is that a pressing need that qualifies me to be able to take out a loan? Buying a house.
No, you can live under a roof without having to go into interest, like renting.
Exactly. What's wrong with renting? Plus, there's other options like rent with the option to buy. But what's wrong with renting? I never understood that. I've always rented. I'll die renting. I mean, what's the point? I don't want to own a home. I'd move too much. Why do I want to own a house? I'm stuck with that sucker. Plus, it ain't paid off for 30 years. And I like to move around. If I get sick of looking at it, what am I going to do with it? So, you know, there's other alternatives. So this is what we spoke about yesterday in regards to interest. Interest is haram. It will always remain haram. But you may find yourself in a situation where you have to indulge in it. And if you do, you go with the least amount you can get and hate it and try to look for alternative ways out of it. Now, today, we're going to talk about two other issues that many Muslims are confused about. We're going to talk about paying on credit, and we're going to talk about paying in advance. A lot of Muslims that believe that paying on credit is interest. A lot of Muslims believe that paying in advance is interest. Why do they believe this? Because they don't know anything. They don't know what interest is. Well, let's talk about what they really are, what paying in credit entails and what paying in advance entails. And you will see that it's not whether or not it is interest. Let's see. So that's what we're going to talk about, buying on credit and paying in advance. One of the things that I stress as a dawah to you guys a lot is, you know, there's nothing that we are experiencing on this earth today that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions have not experienced. Just like interest existed back in their days, just like protesting occurred, boycotting occurred, but they didn't indulge in them. Well, buying on credit is not new either. The Muslims used to buy on credit just like they do today, back then too. We have to understand that as Muslims, we have to be aware that our religious commands are to be moderate. Allah tells us that most things here on this earth are good and clean. And Allah has made most things on earth lawful for us. But he commands us to have certain behavior in regards to this earth, such as being moderate in our living habits and not being overly thrifty in our financial affairs. Where's the dalil? Allah says, do not be extravagant, because Allah does not like those who are extravagant. Most Muslims read that interpretation of the meaning and they don't understand what extravagant means. They believe that just because I have a nice car, that I drive a Lexus, that I have a Louis Vuitton purse, and that I have a Pashima hijab on, that I'm extravagant. No. Extravagant means to live above your means. Nowhere does Islam forbid us from having nice things. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad said, if Allah has blessed you with money, show your gratitude to him by wearing nice clothing and nice things. Allah wants us to enjoy the good of this world. Uthman, radiallahu anha, why did the Prophet marry two of his daughters to him? Because Uthman was a multi-millionaire, number one. He was a multi-millionaire. And he could afford to give any wife whatever they wanted. And his wives lived a beautiful, nice life. as did his children, as did him. Okay? So nowhere does Islam forbid us from having nice things. But what Allah tells us is only live according to your means. Don't put yourself in debt. Don't go out and buy things that you can't afford. Don't buy things that you don't need, and you end up putting yourself in debt. That's what Islam teaches us. Islam is about being balanced. Okay, and that's what this verse is saying. Allah says in the interpretation of the meaning, do not squander your money. Those who squander are the brothers of the evil ones. What does that mean? Don't waste your money. Don't buy things that you don't really need just to say you have them. This is what Islam forbids. If I don't need that jilbab, why am I buying it? A lot of people, for example, will come to visit me and they'll see that I have, which I do, I have a lot of hijabs. But as you guys know, I wear every single one. I don't squander my money. I have to be on TV every day. So I have to have a different hijab for every day. But if you look closely at me, I'm wearing the same jilbabs, and I'll dress my jilbabs up with different hijabs. Okay. So, I'm living according to my means. I don't have any clothing to give away to anybody because all the clothing I have, I need for me. Okay. So I live according to my means. And this is what Allah wants us to do, to enjoy the lawful things here. Just don't overdo it. Don't go above your means and don't be wasteful. That's what Allah is saying. Do not be wasteful. So, and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us the same thing. When the Quran asks Muslims to spend in the way of Allah, Allah is not asking us to spend all of our money in the way of him, just a part of it. Everything is balanced. If a person spends only a part of what he earns, then you will not become destitute. So Islam is all about moderation, everything within moderation. That's why we have the hadith, whereas a man was dying and he told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Oh Prophet, I'm sick and I might be dying soon." He said, I want to give all my wealth for the sake of Allah to you, for the sake of Allah. Can I do that? The Prophet said it would be better if you gave your wealth to your offspring so they won't be destitute and poor. And then the man said, well, can I give a third of my wealth? The Prophet said a third would be okay, but even that would be too much to take from your destitute. So that way the man left a third of his money for Allah, for the sake of Allah. So Allah doesn't want us to give everything we have to the point where we're going without, just enough, in charity to keep you balanced in your humility. Everything is about balancing us in our humility. Okay? So we can have nice things. Just be balanced. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam warned us about being in debt. In fact, we have a hadith, whereas the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught the companions, to seek refuge in Allah from being overtaken by debt. In fact, he used to make dua. He would say, "Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from the burden of debt and from the anger of men." What does this mean? The worst thing, the burden of debt is so stressful. I mean, I was so sick this past 2 weeks. One of the reasons why I was so sick, it was sick with stress because I was in debt. I couldn't figure out what happened to my health insurance. My health insurance got messed up. It didn't get paid. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm in debt. I'm getting ready to go down without no insurance. And oh my God, I ain't got a credit card to charge it on. I went berserk. These past 2 weeks, I had stress bumps on me, stress this, everything. But alhamdulillah, I wasn't in debt. You know, Allah got me out of that. He let me suffer for 2 weeks. And then finally, my insurance is paid now. And I did find a credit card to put it on. And I'm going to pay it off. I'm okay. That's a hateful feeling to be in debt like that. To not know where your next meal coming from. How you going to pay your bills. You know, subhanAllah. So the Prophet taught us to seek refuge in Allah from debt and also from the anger of men. What does that mean? People being angry at you because you owe them. Nobody wants you to owe them money because we all need our money. So he taught us how to say, oh Allah, I seek refuge in you against debt and from the anger of men. That means from the anger of me having to owe people, to pay people. He also used to say, oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from disbelief and debt. And when he said this, a companion asked him, why do you equate debt with disbelief? Because Prophet said, because are they not the same? A person that goes into debt is a person that doesn't believe that fat meat is greasy. This is a person that doesn't believe that there's a such thing as being balanced. This is a person that doesn't believe that there's a such thing as living beyond what you can afford. This is a person that doesn't believe that Allah speaks the truth, subhanAllah. So, you know, that's why the Prophet equated debt with disbelief. Also, you're constantly lying. You're always lying, telling your creditors you're going to pay them tomorrow. I'll pay you tomorrow. Give me another hamburger and I'll pay you tomorrow. Give me another hamburger and I'll pay you tomorrow. This is disbelief. You're constantly lying, you know, and deceiving people. You can't be trusted. So this is why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam equated debt with disbelief. And also, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to sometimes say, oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from sin and debt. And a person asked him, why do you often ask Allah to protect you from debt? And he said, because the person who is in debt is the person that tells lies. The person in debt is the one who breaks his promises. So again, being in debt can endanger your morality. And once your morality becomes endangered, then your faith, your iman can become endangered. So as Muslims, you know, we need to try to work on limiting ourselves with our debts. You know, we are living in the day and age in which you have to have credit cards. Whether you want to have a credit card or not, it's a necessity now. Because you have to have credit in order to get anything nowadays. This is one of the signs of the last hour too. The Prophet said interest will become the norm. Interest will become the determining factor, and it already has. So we have to have credit cards, but you use them wisely. Don't go out and charge up stuff knowing that you can't pay it off. You have to have a payment plan. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Having a payment plan with your creditors. Okay? Don't live above your means. Don't buy what you can't afford to pay for, and don't buy what you don't need. And to show how serious a sin it is to not pay off your debts, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would not perform the funeral prayer for a person who died owing debts. In fact, he would ask, does the person have enough money in his estate to cover his debt? Or he would ask, is there anyone here who will pay off this person's debt? And if the person didn't have no one to do either one, then the prophet would have someone else do his funeral. But then later, when the Muslims began to get more money from the spoils of war, the prophet would pay their debts off. Okay. And that's what we should try to do. A lot of you guys will ask me, Sister Laila, what can we do for a Muslim who has died? One of the best things that you can do for any Muslim who has died is pay off his or her debts. Ask the family, does he or she have any debts? I'll pay off their debts for them. That's a lot of blessings in doing that. There's a lot of blessings. I remember when my stepfather died a couple of years ago, a couple of people wanted to pay off his debts. But alhamdulillah, my stepfather didn't have any debts because my family, we paid him off. My brothers paid his debts off. But I thought it was so kind because my stepfather was a good man. And a lot of people came forward and said, we want to take on his debts. Whatever debts he had, let's pay them off. And my brothers told him he's taken care of. We took care of his debts. He didn't have any debts. Alhamdulillah. Okay. Try to pay off the debts of a person. That's a lot of reward. A lot of reward. Because if you help, there's a hadith where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if you help a brother in this world, relieve him of a problem in this world, Allah will relieve you of a problem in the hereafter. So that's why there are some Muslims who do have money, and they will come and say, does anybody need their debts paid off? Because that way Allah will alleviate them of a debt of sins on the day of judgment. That's a good thing to do. Also, to show how serious it is to die owing a debt. We talk about martyrdom, especially in this day and age right now with all the Muslims dying all over the world from this war that's going on. You know, we hear a lot about martyrs. But first of all, I want everyone to remember only Allah knows who the martyrs are. Okay, only Allah knows. In fact, we have a hadith whereas the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam stopped Umar. And this hadith is Bukhari and also Muslim. Umar was walking through the battlefield saying, this person's a martyr, this person's a martyr. And the Prophet said, don't say that. Because that person you just called a martyr is in hell right now, holding on to the garment he stole. He said only Allah knows who the true martyrs are. But instead, what we can say is this person had a good death. He died in a good way that could make him a martyr. Okay, because Allah knows best. We have to remember that. But we have a lot of Muslims right now who are meeting their end in a good way. They're meeting a good ending so they could possibly be martyrs. Remember, the Prophet taught us that Allah, let's look at the hadith. Allah forgives the martyr of everything except for debt. Y'all see that? And what's the source? Muslim. If that person died a martyr, Allah will forgive him of all his sins, but he will not be forgiven of the debts that he owes. So that's why if you were living in Palestine right now, this is what one of the Palestinians here told me, that all these people that die, the first thing they do is say, did he have any debts? Let me pay off his debts. Let me pay off his debts. Because Allah knows best, but they had a good ending. This man died the death of a good ending. But I want to make sure that he has that sin of debt paid off, so people come forward offering to pay off that deceased person's debts. That's how the Palestinians roll over there. What debts did he have? I got it. I got it. I got it. I'll take it. See why I tell you that we're not on that level. Now, of course, I'm not saying that all Palestinians are believers and strong. We got some crooked people everywhere. But for those that are true believers, that's what happens. Somebody gets killed through the bombing. Okay, what debts he got? I got his debts. I got his debts. SubhanAllah. What a good thing to do. because that's the only thing that the martyr is not forgiven of. Okay? Also, we have a hadith where the prophet said, if a man borrows from the people with the intention of paying them, Allah will help him to pay him back. But if he borrows without intending to repay the person, Allah will destroy him. This is why I tell you guys, don't worry about it. If you have to buy something, we got to have a nice home. You got to have food. You got to have clothing. You got to have a car. You got to have. Just have the intention of paying off your debts, and Allah will make a way. And I tell you, this is true. Because I have been up to my forehead in debt so many times. Who hasn't? Living in America, we live debt by debt. But I've paid them off several times. I've paid off my credit cards several times. And don't ask me how Allah made it happen. Okay? Because I've always had the intention to come out of this debt. And I'm telling you, Allah will get you out of it. Just like he got me out of this health insurance thing that I was going through 2 weeks ago. He had me suffer for 2 weeks. Allah never lets us suffer but for so long. That's his way of teaching us a lesson. Okay? And I learned my lesson. That brother ain't working here no more. Won't get another check from Laila. Hello. Yeah, you learn your lesson the hard way, as Fresno say. So again, guys, all of these hadiths and verses of the Quran speak about the seriousness of owing debts. Okay, don't go around borrowing money from people if you don't have the intention of paying it back. If you got those credit cards, don't even think to use them if you have no means or no intentions of paying it back. And so now we're going to talk about credit, talking about credit cards. Like I said, we're living in the days of fitan that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam warned us of, the days in which interest becomes the normity instead of the abnormity. Nowadays, if you ain't got good credit, you can't buy a car. You can't live in a nice area. If you want to raise your children in a good environment, they're going to do a credit check. You got to have A1 credit. If you don't have A1 credit, you got to go back to the hood. So we have to sometimes find ourselves forced to get credit cards. There are credit cards that are no interest. Okay, you can get some no interest credit cards. I know, because I got a couple of them. Okay. And then there are the credit cards that do entail interest. I know, because I got a couple of them too, unfortunately. Okay. But there's a key. There's a key. There's a key to getting around that interest. First of all, everybody knows it's best to buy in cash, but it is not, I repeat, it is not haram to buy to buy on credit by mutual consent. Now, I'm not talking about interest now. I'm talking about buying on credit. There are some Muslims that think that just because you buy something on credit, you're dealing in interest. Interest is borrowing money and paying it back. Borrowing money and paying it back. Buying on credit is not the same. Even in the Prophet's days, they bought on credit. Let's talk about it. Well, the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, bought some grain from a Jew on credit. And he pledged his coat of mail as security. This hadith is authentic. The source, Bukhari. But what happened? What does it mean to buy on credit? To buy on credit means I'm going to put something up as collateral. This is my collateral. If you allow me to have a certain amount of something, I will give you my car as collateral, my house as collateral. A lot of people put their house up for collateral. Say that your son is in jail. You got to pay his bond. His bond is $100,000. You don't have $100,000 to pay. So what do? You put your house up on credit. You know, what are you doing? You're signing your house. Here's my house. If I don't pay back the $100,000, then you take my house. This is lawful. That's what the prophet did. Give me a certain amount of grain. And in turn, you can hold on to this armor as collateral that I'm going to pay it back. So who told you that deferred credit is haram when even our prophet did it? See how we have to learn our deen? Okay. Now, but again, when it comes to buying on credit, it has to be by mutual consent for a specific amount of time, and you're pledging a specific thing. You got 6 months to pay me, or I'll take the house. You got 2 years to pay this, or I get the house. So it's for a specific amount for a specific amount of time. This is lawful. Okay? Now, there are some scholars out there that say that it's a form of interest, but this is not correct. This is not correct. Because number one, when we say that something is haram, there has to be a clear evidence that says it's haram. If buying on a deferred credit is haram, why is this authentic hadith here? Y'all see that? So I put here what El Shawkani said. He said, on the basis of legal reasons, the followers of Imam Shafi, Hanafi, Zayd ibn Ali, El Muayyid, Bilal, and the majority of the scholars say it's lawful. First of all, it don't even matter how you're going to get around that hadith. Okay? So those Muslims running around here talking about buying on credit is haram. What's their evidence? We got this authentic hadith here. There's other hadiths too that show how the prophet allowed the companions to buy on credit. Okay? So credit is not haram. What about this? Paying in advance. As Muslims, we are allowed to make an advance payment of a specific price for a specific quantity to be delivered at a fixed time. The prophet allowed this too. This happened in the time of the companions too. This was very prevalent in Medina, especially when the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam arrived. Okay? We have this authentic hadith from Bukhari and Muslim, Ibn Abbas. He said when the prophet came to Medina, they were paying 1 and 2 years in advance for fruit. But he told them those who pay for anything in advance must do so for a specific measure and weight, with the fixing of a specific time. So this limitation of specifying the weight and measure and time removes the uncertainty and the misunderstanding. And this was practiced by the companions. They would pay in advance for a fruit of a certain number of palm trees. Now, this was considered unlawful because you don't know if there's going to be bad weather. You don't know if Allah is going to send a blight or something to destroy it. So items that are not in your possession, we can't do that for. But things that are here, for example, you want to go, you want to buy a living room set. You go to Value City Furniture and you find a living room set. The set is right there. You want to hold it. They tell you that they can hold it for you, but you got to pay me $200 in advance and I'll hold it. You can do that. because the furniture is right here. You can touch it. You can feel it, see it. It's right there in front of you. You're giving them an advance payment, you know, as to hold it. This is lawful, guys. Okay. So again, we have to learn the deen. We have to be very careful telling people that paying in advance is haram. Not if it's something that I can see. Not if it's something that's right here. I got this computer here. It's a $2,000 computer. Can I put $200 down in advance to hold it and then pay the rest by a month? Yes, you can. That's what paying in advance is. It's a down payment that you putting down in advance for a specific amount of time. And then you're agreeing to make payments until it's paid off. This is lawful. That is not interest. Does everybody understand? Okay, well, let's have a quiz to see how well you guys understand this. First question. Why did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam not perform the funeral prayer of a person who did not pay their debts? Why did he not perform the funeral prayer of a person who did not pay off their debts? Anybody?
Yeah, because Allah says that that's the only thing He doesn't forgive.
Okay, and why else?
Was this to show how bad of a sin it is?
Exactly, to show how bad of a sin it is. The Prophet didn't pray the funeral prayer because he wanted the Muslims to see that to die owing a debt is horrific. So there's some things that our Prophet would do just to emphasize the severity of it. Okay, so to show how horrific a sin this is, I'm not doing the funeral prayer of any of you who owe debts, because the Arabs used to owe debts a lot back in them days. Before Islam, remember, the Prophet brought balance and brought morality to the Arabs. The Arabs were people that didn't care about debts. They would usurp each other and harm each other. Only the strong survive. So to show how bad a sin it is, the Prophet said, I'm not going to do the funeral prayer. But then when the Muslims got money, he started paying off the people's debts for them. Good job, Brother Marar. Okay, next question. The martyr is forgiven of everything except what?
Debt.
Exactly. Allah will forgive the martyr of everything except his debts. That's why it's important, guys. And like I said, over there in Palestine and Yemen and other parts of the Muslim world, that's what they're doing. The believers are saying, what's his debts? What's his debts? They're paying off the debts real quick. Okay. Next question. Abdullah has a no interest credit card and pays a certain amount of money each month until it's paid off. Is this a form of interest? Is this a form of interest? He has a no interest credit card, and let's say the limit is $2,000, and he's charged his credit card up to $2,000, and he pays $150 a month until it's paid off. Is this considered interest?
No, because it says it's no interest credit card, and he pays it off.
Exactly. The simple fact, not so much that it's a no interest credit card, the simple fact that he's paying it off each month makes it okay. And even if it was an interest credit card, if you got an agreement to pay it off, the interest is haram. The interest is haram. And you need to pay it off ASAP. You understand, people? But the point I'm going to make here is about this Hajj stuff. I get a lot of questions from people that want to make Hajj. They say, oh, Sister Laila, you know, I'm in debt. I got credit cards I haven't paid off, and they are interest credit cards. Can I make Hajj? If you have arrangements with your creditors to pay a certain amount of money each month, then you're good. So even if it was an interest credit card, as long as you have arrangements, you're paying $250 a month, so to be paid off in 2 years. Or you're paying $150 a month, so that card and the interest will be paid off in 2 years. Then you're good to go. Okay, good job. You have an arrangement to pay it off. What about this? Abdullah buys a bed for $400, but the agreement is to pay $200 in advance. Is this permissible? Yes or no?
Yes, that's considered down payment.
Yeah, this is permissible because, again, this is paying in advance. The Prophet used to pay in advance. He allowed the companions to pay in advance as long as what they're paying for is in existence. As long as it's here, as you can see it, tangible. It's right there in possession of the person's possession. It can't be no fruits. I can't pay you $1,000 in advance for your corn crop. Why is it that I cannot pay $1,000 in advance for your corn crop? Because I don't know if your crop is going to grow this year. It could be a bad winter. It might be a weak summer. That's something different, but something that's tangible, that's in my possession right now. You can pay me in advance $200 and then make monthly payments. Everybody understand? All right. So any questions about any of the things we covered today? Any questions about any of these things we covered?
I got a question. So as long as you're making a payment on your car or your credit card or something, that's the agreement that you have.
Yeah.
Because the interest is already haram for us to do. But okay.
I got to try to pay it off. Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of us got credit cards, so I'm paying them every month. Send them whatever the agreement is each month. Most credit cards have a minimum amount. I always send more. And I'm going to give you guys a key. Interest is haram. To get out of that interest, always send more. If my credit card payment is $36, y'all think I'm sending $36? I send $100. The minimum amount I pay anybody is $100 to try to overcome that stupid interest. Okay. Any other questions?